Hello everyone, after a bit of a delay, this is once again Mini Ninja speaking, and we have a new bootleg breakdown to talk about, or bootleg comparison, as we're actually going to compare the legit SH Figuarts Bulma figure here to this thing. I don't know who the market for was, but apparently a random Chinese group called Legend Creation decided to make a knockoff version of the Dragon Ball's line Bulma figure, aka the first one, which is based off a manga appearance and not a real kind of regular book appearance. And speaking of things that are inexplicable, you'll notice a lot of the copyright information and logos are completely missing from the bootleg here, and even the background little bit of cardboard is actually much plainer than expected. Another little thing you want to look for is that the coloring of the bootleg package here is a bit darker, more contrasty than the real line. But really the thing that makes it stand out more is how much effort they went in order to scrub all the different legal logos and company names off this thing. Even going as far in the back, as you can see here, to scrub off all the original warning and the real UPC code off this thing in order to put a bootleg version of the above. Yeah, they went through a lot of effort to get rid of any mentionings of the official name here, because it's a Legend Creation product, not a Bandai product. Remember that, folks. Now, as we're getting into the actual packaging itself, I did notice when I was pulling out the original figure, there actually is, much to my surprise, a version of the instruction booklet, or instruction page as I should really be saying, from there, which amusingly enough does also have the SH Figuarts logo that would be above Bulma's name normally, scrubbed off, but otherwise, as far as I can tell, is pretty much identical to the real deal. Not that this figure is particularly difficult to work with, but it's still a nice inclusion to have. As I remove the protective bit of plastic, I have to say I got a little more than I was expecting out of this $20 shot in the dark here. As it turns out, the figure itself is a fairly reasonable recreation of the original SH Figuarts one. And that, I have to say, is surprising because, one, I didn't know there was really an audience for this thing, and two, aside from some notable things such as, yeah, it's kind of, there are telltale signs that some bits here and there were indeed recasted, namely the hair in top of being slightly separated from the face. There also has some softer details, which is also a little more noticeable on the pants and especially the shoulder pad, I would find. And there are some slight fitting issues here and there. Otherwise, everything works as you expect. Minus that one issue I'm having with the shoulder right now. All the joints move as they're supposed to. They're nice and tight in this case. They're appropriate. They actually match what the real joints for this particular figure are. Because I have a real one, other than the one that you saw in the box at the beginning of the video that I have toyed around with. So I found exactly what I was expecting to find, which was surprising enough. Even down to the hip articulation there, and the kind of specialized knee and elbow joints, which are different than what you get out of most figures from SH Figuarts. So that means that they went through some effort in order to recreate or at least match up with what you expect to get out of the figure there. And especially the color matching too is pretty close, which is entirely surprising. I'd say the biggest issue in terms of the recasting is on top of the hair. There's a little bit of issue around the upper torso. As you can kind of see, there definitely was some spacing there. And in my case, the hips are, maybe I could slightly change the alignment a bit because there's some difficulty getting it to stand on occasion. But the thing is, it can stand. And in terms of the faces and all the accessories, you get exactly what you're supposed to with this figure. You get the two alternate faces, which, for the most part, aside from maybe a little bit of a line width issue, they're a little thicker than they should be. And the decals for the eyes being shiny, those match up. In terms of the goggles there, it's messing around with like it's a little stiff, but it's about accurate. Maybe there's a little bit of missing paint on the side, but otherwise that about matches. For the hands, there could be a little bit of cleanup here and there, but that's maybe on 1 or 2 of the hands. Everything else actually looks just fine, to be entirely honest on there. And they actually swap on and off on the hand joints here, which is fine, which kind of is a testament that they actually did the jobs properly for the joints here. And realistically, in terms of accessories, there are only 2 that I had issue with. One being the Dragon Ball itself, as you can kind of see there, on top of being a little kind of murky, not very see-through like the real one that's on the right here. It also has those air bubbles who were trapped in, meaning that this thing wasn't properly pressure chambered or something like that in order to remove that, or vacuum chambered, whatever you want to use the term there, or as appropriate for this one. So they didn't do that properly. And the gun itself is a little on the warp side, and because it's a recasted bit, it's also a bit soft on the detail. But even with that in mind, if we get the appropriate hand in order to hold the gun can indeed be held properly in this case. It actually works on there, and if you switch it in order to put it on the figure itself, it works like it's supposed to. If anything, you can probably take like a heat gun or dip this gun in hot water in order to soften it up and slowly bend it back into its proper form, and that's pretty minimal work, if I'm being totally frank, which I have no problem with. I'm probably going to do that after I'm done this particular video in order to just touch it up there. Here's with the hand now holding the gun, just for a proof of concept on this. As you can see, even with it being slightly out of shape, yeah, it still fits like it's supposed to. And looks appropriate to the figure. And speaking of which, let's move off and change the faceplates in this case. As you can see, it comes off like it's supposed to. The hair is like a nice soft bit on there. The face is pulled off and fit on there. Each one fits on there just fine in this case. So let's just switch to more of a neutral face, not a winking face. And everything just pops off and pops right back on like it's supposed to. Absolutely no issue whatsoever on this, which is a nice surprising change of pace, especially considering some of the other bootlegs I've dealt with in recent memory. Now, we can't end this video without doing a proper side-by-side comparison between the legit $60 figure on the left here, as well as the one on the right. And while there are definitely some differences, like the differences in exact detailing on the hair and the shoulder pad should be readily apparent now in this case, including some paint issues which kind of glazed over on here, namely like the name tag of Bulma on the shoulder pad there is definitely a lot more faint on the bootleg here, and there are definite scuff issues like on the wristband and a few other spots like the bag even, now that I see it here, and the shirt, which could have used an extra shade of white, especially on the chest part on there. But otherwise, for $40 savings, you're not doing half bad with the bootleg here. All the joints really do match up with the real ones, even if there's slight fitting issues, because you can tell that there are recastings, so they're slightly shrunk compared to what they should be on the real one. And that makes the joints stick out a little more as a result, which subsequently makes the bootleg slightly taller, oddly enough, on that one. But otherwise, it's pretty much a good representation of what the real one is for a third of the cost. Can't really complain too much. It matches up pretty well. The hands and other accessories, the faceplates, the main ones, fit in, and you can swap them in and out with the bootleg as you're supposed to, so they have a reasonable fit. You aren't exactly worried about the joints falling apart on this thing, which is a very common issue with a lot of bootlegs. And in terms of the letdowns, probably certain accessories like the gun and the Dragon Ball are the biggest letdowns. And well, this kind of makes it very apparent why the gun is an issue on this one. But other than that, you're not doing half bad. I would actually say for the price point there, as you can find it for 20, if not a little bit less, you're doing really good on this case for something that will fill in that one little gap of the collection. Or in my case, part of the reason I wanted to pick this up is I need this for some custom fodder in this case. Namely, my Android 18 kind of fell apart there as I'm working and making it into a Chile. And Bulma here can be translated into Space Bulma, aka Chile, pretty readily, I think. So that's exactly what we're going to do, and hopefully that'll be subject for a future video on that one. However, stepping back on this particular video, could I recommend this particular bootleg? Surprisingly, yes. Especially if you can find it for a cheaper price than I did, then you're doing really well for yourself. And in terms of needing it for custom fodder, yeah, go right for it. I can endorse this one as being a decent picture, or a decent figure to pick up for that purpose. Hopefully, I can say the same about Gohan, aka Saiyaman, in the very near future, but that's another video for another day. See you later.